I hope beyond all else that I am mistaken, whether it's due to a misinterpretation of what I saw, if the events actually occurred, or that the events themselves were entirely fabricated by my then fatigued mind. I had just ended a long shift at work, and the energy drinks I had consumed during the day got me mentally and physically hyperactive after my shift ended. To expend the excess energy, I decided to go for a walk around my neighborhood. What some may call upper middle, my subdivision is a sprawling area where the suburb establishment coexists with nature rather than supplant it. Nature is kept at bay so not to intrude upon man's mundane comfort, but also allowed to grow freely in segmented sections, through which trails have been cut to allow for nature walks. The word harmony would be adequate to describe the balance established. I explain all this to provide an idea of the area so that the weirdness of what happened truly resonates. I do not live in some rural, uncultivated expanse of land. Man has stamped its mark here, and people can be seen walking their dogs, children riding their bikes, vehicles passing to and fro. You cannot walk without seeing at least a few people, and the large houses are evidence enough of a very present population. My walk led me down one of the aforementioned paths that cut through the dense pocket of trees, and eventually it took me to a clearing, in the center of which was a small pond. North, up a small hill, was a sort of recreational hub between two different sections of the neighborhood. I sat at the pond for a while, hoping the still water would transfer its restfulness to my own caffeine-stimulated mind. But I still buzzed from the stimulant, and decided to jog up the hill and beyond, hoping to just tire myself out. I arrived at the hub, benches, playground, and a building from which sporting equipment could be rented, and continued my jog towards the next portion of the path, which continued on the opposite side of the street. A car was coming, so I stopped to allow it to pass. I would have continued to cross, but something to the left caught my eye. 4 figures were standing together, 2 of whom were gesturing casually toward the nearby forest and houses. The other 2, I came to realize with a sudden and terrible awe, were clearly not human. Usually when terrors such as these are noticed, they appear in shadows, hidden by darkness or veil, not at 6 p.m. when the sun still shares its revealing light with the world. I don't want to go through the pains of remembrance necessary to adequately describe those other 2 beings. I'll say only that they were alien and in the truest, most base sense, foreign to everything natural to this world. The 2 who were vaguely humanoid were clothed in what appeared to be form-fitting gray suits, buttoned and fastened immaculately. From a distance, I couldn't make out their faces, but I could tell that they were hairless. They were engaged in a speech of sorts, obvious by the way they moved their hands as if orienting. Something about their behavior seemed vaguely familiar. I recognized the air of the mannerisms as something I had seen before as a child. The nature of their interactions, the fact that these clearly inhuman beings were just out in the open, going about their business as if they belonged, terrified me. Cars went by, yet none stopped or even slowed. Other joggers passed, totally unaware of the weird gathering mere feet from them. The nature of their interaction, the fact that these clearly inhuman beings were just out in the open, going about their business as if they belonged, terrified me. Cars went by, yet none stopped or even slowed. Other joggers passed, totally unaware of the weird gathering mere feet from them. What really unnerved me was that even dogs hadn't noticed the strange visitors. And if horror movies have taught me anything, it's that dogs, in general, can pick up on this kind of creepy shit. I wanted to simply walk away, tell myself that my brain was just fried from the terrible idea to jumpstart it with energy drinks. But the realness of their presence wouldn't let me move on. I've seen the immaterial apparitions projected by a sleep-deprived mind. Those 4 weren't anything like that. So without any other course of action left to take, I walked toward them. I was standing about 6 feet from the group, and not a thing changed. They hadn't noticed me, nor had they made any indication that they noticed the other people casually walking and playing throughout the area. This somewhat lessened my trepidation, because at least for the time being, they didn't appear hostile. The 2 formally dressed beings were still doing what was obviously some kind of presentation, and the other 2 seemed enthralled. Though that's complete speculation on my part. I think it was my focus on them that pulled them into a state of awareness. One of them stopped speaking. At this proximity, I could see that they had no faces, just stretchless of pale blue skin where their mouths and sensory organs would be. This stretch moved in conjunction with their gesturing, like a facial pulsation, so I equated this to the act of speech. The one that stopped then looked around as if it were trying to locate the source of the focus. I was practically right in front of him, and curiously, momentarily, unsuperbed my fear, causing me to focus even more on him. As I expected, his gaze honed in on my location, though he still didn't see me as I saw him. He nudged his partner, who ignorantly oriented, and then the both of them stared at the spot where I stood. The one who hadn't noticed me first, we'll call him Tall, since he was taller. He made a weird gesture with his right hand. He held it at his chest, fist at first, closed fingers facing me, then opened his hand slowly. He then pantomimed a motion that suggests the grasping of a ball and turned his hand to the left. Despite the abstract nature of the display, I got the sense that time was involved somehow. He ceased the turning, and I felt a slight shift in the environment. Nothing dramatic or even really noticeable, but it seemed that a different change had occurred, whether it was localized to the immediate area around us or in the fabric of space-time. I couldn't tell you, I just know that things had been reversed, or that these visitors had rewound something. Then, they truly saw me. The 2 presenters were immediately taken back, their duel recoiling, very human in nature. The other 2 entities made movements denoting some incomprehensible reaction. My temporary suppressed fear returned with fever. I was still very much afraid, despite how startled they were of my sudden appearance. Short, the shorter figure, did a series of gestures toward Tall, then to the 2 bizarre entities, and then again to his partner. Tall made gestures that suggested attempts to calm the monstrous duo, who moved like nightmares beside us. Once they were presumably placated, Tall returned his attention to me. I could be wrong, but I think he actually straightened his suit and made efforts to regain composure, as if he planned to make a formal address. He held up his hands, palms facing me, fingers I had just noticed that there were 12 of them in each hand, stretched wide and pushed forward. He hadn't made physical contact, but I felt a force press upon me, and a subsequent connection of some kind established. I felt the intimidation of mental contact, dare I say, a telepathic connection of some sorts. Then, I heard a voice. If stark nothingness had a sound, it would be that voice. There was both a substance and an emptiness to it. I heard him speak, and I'm not sure if the voice and its unnerving hollowness scared me more, or the message it spoke.
We're terribly sorry.
We seem to have arrived a bit earlier than appointed. By our measurements, you should have all been gone at this point in time. But we can see now that we underestimated your existential persistence. Please forgive us for this intrusion. Unfortunately, our guests have expressed great interest in this planetary property and wish to make a purchase as soon as possible. We will expedite your removal shortly. Thank you for your continued patience in these coming weeks as we make the necessary adjustments. After those words, I guess I fainted or was purposely rendered unconscious because I awoke on the sidewalk with a man and woman standing over me. They said I had been jogging in place, staring at nothing, and suddenly collapsed. They helped me to my feet and left when I assured them that I was okay, just tired. I walked over to a bench and sat down, trying to process what had happened. It was then that the realization hit me. The familiarity of the visitors' mannerisms. They behaved just as realtors had when my family first moved into this neighborhood 12 years ago. Showing off the house, making exaggerated gestures as they entered rooms to point out the desirable features. These two beings in some other sphere of time were showing off Earth when all humans had died. I returned home and started typing this up. As I said at the beginning, I hope my mind was just playing tricks on me, conjuring some weird waking dream as it tried to reconcile its tiredness with the effects of the energy drinks. Perhaps it just turned a distant memory in a terrible hallucination. God, I hope that's the truth, but I can't bring myself to accept that it is.